All right, and joining us now is Christina Bennett, spokesperson for the pro-life organization Live Action. Christina, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's our pleasure. Talk to us about why today is so important to you and share your story if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I got involved in the pro-life movement when I was in college. I grew up in Connecticut, that's where I currently live, and I had never heard abortion talked about in church, and I had never heard abortion talked about in my family, not during my dinner or at home, never had a conversation about abortion. But I was at church in college, and someone approached me and said, God wants you to know that something remarkable happened around the time of your birth. And so I asked my mom, did anything remarkable happen around the time of my birth? And I figured she would know, right?
Yeah, that's a good next step.
Who am I going to ask? I asked my mom. So she said to me, yes, I met an angel before you were born, and I don't want to talk about it. And my mother had never said anything like that. And so I didn't know what to do with that, but I was involved in a campus ministry called Campus Crusade for Christ. And so I went away on a summer ministry trip to Kentucky, and I worked in the Boys and Girls Club, and I journaled a lot. And I said, when I get back home to Connecticut, I'm going to ask my mom, what do you mean that you met an angel before I was born? So she was getting ready to go somewhere, and I cornered her in the bathroom. And I was like, Mom, you need to tell me. What do you mean that you met an angel before I was born? And she said, no, you'll hate me if I tell you. I can't tell you. You'll hate me.
My goodness.
And so I just knew that this was the moment that I had to know what was going on. And so I said, Mom, please, I will never hate you. I love you. Please tell me. And she opened up and told me that she had scheduled to abort me at Mount Sinai Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. She was afraid, and my father was pressuring her to get an abortion. He already had a few children at the time, and so he's putting pressure on her to have an abortion. And she went to her mentor at church. And unfortunately, her mentor said, if you come back to this church pregnant and not married, I'll be the first person to put my foot in the door and not let you in. Yeah, really just completely different than Jesus, unfortunately. And my mom just felt rejected. She felt the pressure from my father, the rejection from her Christian mentor. So she went to Mount Sinai Hospital and she met with a counselor, but they never gave her any actual counsel. The woman she met with just said, well, this seems like the best decision for you to make. And they put her in a white hospital gown, and she was told to just go into the waiting room and wait for the doctor to call her name. But she paused for a moment in the hallway and she began to softly cry. And in that moment, there was an elderly African-American janitor who saw her crying and walked up to her and lifted up her chin and looked her in the eyes and said, do you want to have this baby? And my mom said yes. Even though she was in the hospital robe, even though she had paid for the abortion, she said yes. And the woman said, God will give you the strength. And my mom said her eyes were like pools of water, and my mom told me that my mother put her head down for maybe 30 seconds, and then she put her head back up, and she was surprised that the woman was gone, because she said the length of the hallway, her equipment, she was surprised that she was gone out of the hallway so quickly. So she went into the waiting room to get her stuff, and then the abortionist called her name into his office. And when she walked in, there was blood on the floor from the last abortion. He hadn't cleaned up the blood. And she was disgusted, as you can imagine, and said, I've changed my mind. I want to keep my baby. And he said, no. He said, no, you're just nervous. And she said, no, I've changed my mind. And he said, you've already paid for this. And again, she said, I've changed my mind. And he said, well, he actually yelled at this point. And he said, don't leave this room. And she ran out. She ran out. She went to the lobby, and it was 81, so she called my dad on a payphone, and then she told him that she had left, and they tried to make it work. They got married. It didn't last very long, but she ran out and saved my life. Now, she never intended to tell me that story. She would have taken that to the grave with her. I am completely convinced. She never would have told me that story because we never talked about abortion. But God wanted me to know. So God sent somebody else to get me to ask her. And then she knew, okay, now I have to tell her. She didn't know I was going to go all over the country and tell everybody else. But Thankfully, she's okay with that. So,
Christina, what a beautiful story. And I've heard it before, but never in this much detail. So it's such an honor to have you here today. Could you speak a little bit to how learning that about your birth and the circumstances of your life really spurred you to be a leader in the pro-life movement?
Yes. So, and I feel emotional, but that really changed everything for me because, as I mentioned, I didn't come from a family where abortion was talked about. Connecticut's a very pro-abortion state. We don't even require parental notification for teenagers. I remember teenage friends getting abortions in high school, not even having to tell their parents. And everything changed for me. My mom, when she told me that and she left the house, I went to her bed, I sat in her bed and I cried, and I really felt like the Lord impressed upon my heart that He had rescued me, that He had delivered me, and that He wanted me. And as I began to pray and to seek the Lord, He asked me a question that just changed everything. And it was, Christina, the statement that He spoke to my heart was, I wanted you, but the question was, how do you think I feel about the others? And I did not know. Who are the others? I had no idea about the history of Planned Parenthood. I had no idea about the targeting of the African-American community. I had no idea about Margaret Sanger. I couldn't have told you who she was. I couldn't have even named one single pro-life advocate. But when God said to me, how do you think I feel about the others? I knew that in that moment I had to find out. And so I began to talk to women who had abortions. I remember one of the first women I talked to told me she took the RU486 abortion pill and she passed a baby in the toilet. And I just remember sitting with her and thinking, what in the world? Everything I've ever heard about abortion in school is a lie. And what is my responsibility to God to end this? I accepted a calling from the Lord, and I decided that I would work to fight abortion and to save lives for the rest of my life, as long as God would allow me to do that. And I was in my early 20s, now I'm 40. And thankfully, the Lord's grace has kept me faithful to that promise. I'm still on that journey.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us and everybody out there. That's such an incredible story. You're an
welcome.
incredible witness, and what you do is just amazing. And
Thank
you're
you.
saving lives.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina, for being with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm honored to be here.
Yes,
Thank you so much.